Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, with the government shut down, so are most efforts for federal cannabis reform. But the U.S. Hemp Roundtable enlightens President Trump on the economic dangers of a federal hemp ban. Kerry Hinkle has that story in his hemp report. And we turn our focus to the states, and we start in Ohio, where their Governor Mike DeWine issues an executive order to ban THC-infused hemp products for the next 90 days. We talk exclusively with Buckeye lobbyist and advocate Tim Johnson.
It's all propaganda about child safety.
In Michigan, that 24% tax hike is now in effect, and so is a lawsuit to stop it on constitutional grounds. Amie Carter with that story. Plus, New York State sets a new monthly record for sales as the Empire State Market continues to grow exponentially. And an update on the U.S. basketball player who suffers from Crohn's disease who got busted for medical edibles in Indonesia in May. Now, Jared Shaw faces the death penalty. He gives his first words of remorse from inside the prison in that country. And yes, the U.S. won't comment on wrongfully detained American citizens. Plus, the state of Nebraska finally gets around to issuing their first medical cannabis license, while a suspended and fined lab in Massachusetts called Assured is allowed to reopen with a new CEO. And with new ownership and leadership at High Times, that magazine publishes a special 50th anniversary issue. However, the only problem is with that, High Times has been around for 51 years. The new ownership group admits they probably were smoking too much weed to get the count right. Oops, sorry man, my bad. All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly roundup of cannabis news from around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto. And just in case you've been on another planet over the past few weeks, the U.S. government has been closed for business after the two parties couldn't come up with an agreement to keep it open. There are some reports of unofficial meetings between the two political parties. However, there is no agreement in sight. Needless to say, federal cannabis reform gets even further delayed. So, we'll start off with another state that is prohibiting THC-infused products thanks to an executive order by their governor. That state is Ohio. The governor is Mike DeWine, and he has banned all THC products derived from hemp. We'll start with our executive producer, Jimmy Young, talking with Ohio lobbyist Tim Johnson.
Well, thanks, Alaina. Anytime anything happens in the state of Ohio, I get all excited because I get to reconnect with one of my favorite people in the cannabis industry. His name's Tim Johnson. He's a retired law enforcement officer, trainer, supporter, the whole nine yards, and he's also a pro-cannabis lobbyist in the state of Ohio. Tim, good to talk with you again. And always there's something going on in Ohio, isn't there?
Yeah, Jimmy, as always with you, it's a good pleasure to see you and speak with you and share my viewpoints of what I hear and see at the State House and so forth. So it's great to be here today.
And Governor DeWine now is using his executive power to put a temporary restraining order on sales of all THC-infused products and telling his legislature to come up with some regulations. Is that pretty much what the story is here? And are you confident that they're going to be able to do this?
Yeah, and he's been pushing, DeWine's been pushing for this, for a few years. I think what actually made him brave enough to push forward with it was the fact that September 30th, when the Farm Bill Act extension expired, which we expected to be signed and extended again. But I think he figured, okay, I can go ahead and do this now. But he did recognize the Farm Bill Act and give respect to the legitimate hemp license holder, or the legitimate hemp retailers' permission to continue to operate under that farm bill if they were compliant with it, minus what he instituted here. His whole thing, it's all propaganda about child safety, and politicians use that, and I feel it's pretty sad that they have to use children, when they're creating a cannabis law or a hemp law, whatever. If we want to talk about a state of emergency, melatonin is on the street right now as the new narcotic for adolescents, and it's killing kids. it's not just putting them in an ER, it's actually killing them. And you can buy the gummies. Anybody can walk into most health stores, grocery stores, and so forth and buy melatonin gummies. You take too many of them, it suppresses your respiratory system, is my understanding. Texas has an incident where some children died there. There's been some on the East Coast. I have, in the last 5 years, introduced a melatonin bill to regulate it in Ohio. And literally, I've talked to every legislative doctor we have. One of them or a couple of them were pediatricians, and I'm trying to tell them, hey, here's what's going on. And they just keep putting it on their table, but then all of a sudden there's an emergency executive order, health department, everything over what they call intoxicating hemp. And the reality of it is in Ohio, we see more children going to the ERs from products they've got from the legal industry than we have from what they call the gas station sushi. The intoxicating hemp products. So I got to throw the red flag, the BS on, this is for the children. No, it's not. It's a political move. We know you're politically pandering for your party because the elections are coming up here. We understand what's happening. We also understand, there's some of the license holders throwing money in your bank account or whatever, however that works. But the realistic thing is, as far as the intoxicating hemp, the EO, the executive order, I think it's been blown out of proportion. It's really not to the point where all hemp in Ohio is banned. That hasn't happened. When they refer to intoxicating hemp, and it says it in a thing, it is where you have extracted or adulterated a hemp product. And that's the problem. I have a problem with that as well. If I get, if I'm going to buy something, I don't care where it's from a dispensary or from a gas station, I want to know what I'm getting and I want it to be a safe product. I don't want back in the 2011, 12, whatever, the K2 stuff, people were buying these little things at the gas stations and they created House Bill 64 in 2011. Look that up sometime. Wait to be surprised what that says. But it's to control these unknown chemicals that we're putting on hemp products, be it flour primarily. It's really not adulterating. Flour is the stuff that we're seeing sold in Ohio is over 0.3%. So that falls now into the cannabis realm. And I can verify that because last Monday, a law firm that I consult with as a criminal subject or drug policy subject matter reform specialist, we had our two clients were convicted of hemp. Both received a felony 5. And that was because the hemp went from 0.3% to 0.5% as per BCI's test. But that's the kind of stuff that we're seeing happen. And that's what we got to address and stop from happening.
We'll have that entire interview with Tim Johnson and Jimmy Young released on our one-on-one special report on Thursday. Now let's hear from our Ohio correspondent, Christina Brisson.
Hi, I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I actually do have a big story to report this week. Governor Mike DeWine has signed to an executive order that will last for 90 days to remove intoxicating hemp products from shelves. People are saying this will affect a lot of businesses here in Ohio, and we're yet to see what's going to come. Now, that said, a lot of people say they're not necessarily going after store owners, it's those people that are providing the product to said stores. Now, I recently reached out to someone and said, if I could provide something informative out to the public, what would you say that I should inform them about that has to do with these new rules and these intoxicating hemp products? And what he said is, the 2018 Farm Bill did not legalize THCA products. What it did was create a loophole for those products that were under 0.3%. And that's where we are today and trying to figure out how to regulate that, make it safe for people out in the public, and continue the growth for cannabis as we want to see, and the growth for recreational use, as well as medical, and how it can be better here in Ohio and other places going forward. That is your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report. I am Christina Brisson with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Ohio joins many other states that are trying to deal with an industry that is underregulated in many states after the Farm Bill of 2018 defined a legal version of the plant. Now the entire industry is fighting a federal movement to ban them. In the states, governors have been using their executive powers to regulate the hemp-derived products or try to ban them all outright. This week, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable wrote a letter to President Trump urging him not to allow Congress to ban hemp and basically close down their industry. Kerry Hinkle is our man on the hemp beat, and here's his report this week.
This week, we turn our attention to the Buckeye State, where Governor Mike DeWine has joined a growing number of governors that has decided to take executive action on all things hemp. This time, the governor of Ohio has decided that intoxicating hemp is a public health emergency, and therefore we must ban all of these products for the next 90 days, which is the maximum amount allowed under Ohio law. Now, the legislature has been considering for years proposals that are very similar to what the executive order has taken, in that it will require products above a certain THC limit of 2 milligrams in the entire package to only be sold in the regulated marijuana dispensary channel. Now, we understand lawsuits and litigation have already been filed, and this order will be challenged on several grounds to the validity and capabilities of the governor to ban this type of category unilaterally, whereas the legislature has not weighed in on this. And so we understand the governor did this for that exact reason, though, is that he wants to put pressure on the legislature over the next few months in the fall session to finally pass a regulatory bill. So we will monitor as Ohio plays out. But to speak to the big picture, this is a growing trend where across political aisles, governors are deciding, absent the legislatures passing any bills, that they can unilaterally decide to take action on these products. And what's interesting is that, Governor Newsom in California issued a very similar executive order to what DeWine in Ohio has issued, and that it was a flat out ban of all hemp products. And you really can't get, more different in political lines than what DeWine and Newsom are aligned. Whereas you may remember a few weeks ago, Governor Abbott in Texas, one of the most Republican states in the union, issued an executive order not banning, but instead regulating and requiring adults to purchase the product, good manufacturing and testing standards. And then growing to that list is Governor Pritzker in Illinois, where just a few weeks ago, he was asked at a press conference about the issue of intoxicating hemp. And he mentioned, I might do an executive order, we need the legislature to act. And so those are four of the biggest states in the country for both, revenue, projection, population, but also politically. As those four states go, typically goes the rest of the country. So to see these four governors floating out the idea of executive order, some bad, some good for the hemp industry, and not really relevant to the political parties, has been quite an interesting thing to track from the hemp industry perspective. So this week was bad news in Ohio, but it joins the growing trend as each state decides to legislate or regulate us differently. So again, I'm Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp, and I will be back again next week for another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
How about some positive news? We start with a salute to the state of New York. That market continues to grow its revenue, and this past month, the Empire State set a monthly record in sales with $214 million. That total is the largest in 1 month since the adult use market opened in 2021. In the meantime, in Michigan, that controversial 24% tax increase went into effect this past week and immediately was challenged by a lawsuit to stop it. Amie Carter has more from Michigan, where her report is sponsored by Wally's Wonderworld of customizable handmade humidors. Here's Amie.
This is mold on wheat. This is mold on weed. And this is what this Wonderworld plant is supposed to look like. Do you want to make sure this never happens to your precious flower? Check out the handmade humidors by Fenton, Michigan craftsman Gregory Johnson. Each humidor can hold 1 ounce of your stash, and it comes with a Boveda humidity pack. You care about your flower, so protect it inside a humidor made with American-grown maple, cherry, or sapele wood. Check out their website at wallyswonderworld.com. There you'll find the famous award-winning Hakuna Matata No Worries Humidor. You'll also find a variety of humidors with different designs. They even customize accessories like doobie tubes, grinders, and even a classic roach clip from the 70s. Treat your stash with class with a custom-made, handmade humidor from wallyswonderworld.com, and never worry about moldy weed again.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Let's dive in. Last week, I covered the new 24% wholesale tax set to take effect January 1st, 2026. This tax on growers and processors is expected to raise $420 million for road funding. But the industry is pushing back hard. At least 2 lawsuits have been filed in the Court of Claims, including one from the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association. The lawsuits argue that the tax is illegal because it improperly alters the original 2018 voter-approved law without the required 3/4 majority vote. Critics fear that the tax will cause the price to increase so much that small businesses will close, jobs will be lost, and out-of-state sales will drastically decrease. We'll keep you updated on the legal fight for potholes. Michigan cops and the Cannabis Regulatory Agency are sounding the alarm over the state's black market. They report discovering ties between Chinese organized crime networks and large-scale illegal cannabis grow operations across Michigan. Officials warn that these unlicensed sites are undercutting the legal market, and resulting product poses a public safety risk due to lack of testing for harmful pesticides. Authorities are struggling to prosecute these felony operations effectively under the current state law. In Detroit, grow operation AP Cherry Industries surrendered its Class C license in an agreement with the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency. This action came after an investigation uncovered a shocking list of regulatory violations, including a failure to account for thousands of pounds of product in the state tracking system. Most critically, the CRA alleges the company was selling pre-rolls to customers that had failed safety testing due to pesticide contamination. That's going to be it for this week. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Michigan Report is sponsored by Wally'sWonderworld.com.
Down in Virginia, that governor's race is starting to heat up, and there are two different approaches to cannabis reform with a state that has a vibrant medical program. This week, the two candidates for governor squared off in a debate, and one of the questions was a direct one about adult use laws, which the current governor vetoed twice during his term. Now, the Democrat Abigail Spanberger is facing off against the Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears, and one of them will become the first female governor of Virginia. Here's an excerpt from that heated debate this week.
We're going to go to Ms. Spanberger here on the topic of marijuana. You have stated your support legalizing a retail market for recreational marijuana that prioritizes public safety. What public safety concerns do you have? You have 30 seconds.
It's important that there be transparency in what is available on the market. As a former federal agent who worked narcotics cases, as a CIA officer who tracked transnational criminal organizations, as the only person on stage who's had bills signed into law by President Trump related to stopping the flow of fentanyl into our
you're talking over
country.
Each other. Please continue.
As the only person on stage who's had a bill signed into law by President Trump restricting fentanyl flowing into our country and tightening our border security, and as the only person on stage with the endorsement of the Police Benevolent Association, it is extraordinarily important that we have transparency and that there is a clear market in order to be enforced, because it is in the absence of an open and clear and extraordinarily transparent market that law enforcement is not able to...
Don't even know what you're saying.
Ms. Spanberger, your time is up. Now we'll go to Ms. Earl-Sears on this issue. The governor has twice vetoed bipartisan efforts to legalize a retail market for recreational cannabis. Would you sign a bill legalizing the commercial sale of any cannabis products in Virginia? You have 30 seconds.
I believe in medicinal marijuana. I believe it has value. But you know, I had a business, and when I had my business and my employees came up positive for marijuana, they couldn't work for me. They couldn't drive my trucks. They couldn't go in and repair anything. We were working on gas. We're working on electric. We can't afford to have people who are working and they don't know what they're doing. They'll blow everything up. Now, my opponent, I don't understand. You know, she says one thing and then she does another, or she does one thing and says another.
Your time is up,
we can't
Ms.
figure
Sears.
her out.
Now let's check with Joe Parsons to see his take on the debate performances and the obvious divide on the cannabis question between the two candidates.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Following up from last week, the Virginia Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services, or VDACS, has began to strictly enforce the decision that was handed down by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in January. A few businesses in the Henrico, Chesterfield, and Richmond area are now in the finding out phase of these new enforcements. The Simpson Smoke Shop in Henrico, Gas City in Richmond, and 3 Zaza locations, including the newest Zaza R Us that has only been open a little over a month. 8 people have been arrested, and over 60 pounds of what was once legal THCA is now classified as illegal marijuana has been confiscated. The bust was a group effort with the Henrico County Police Department and federal law enforcement. The bust was also responsible for finding over 12 pounds of THC edibles and over $100,000 in cash. It looks like the THCA market in Virginia has began to collapse. And now it's up to legislators to act like they did in Texas, or else many more people and businesses will fail. On an interesting side note, the Zaza Group is no stranger to controversy and legal battles. The dispensary chain was started in New York City during the COVID epidemic and founded by Nadal Y. Salih. Their problems began in 2023 when the toy giant Toys R Us decided to sue the dispensary for using their logo designs, especially the backwards R in the name. The class action lawsuit brought all the wrong attention to the stores that were in Brooklyn, New York. Now that case was settled out of court. However, that attention led to the city taking a closer look at the stores, only to find out that they didn't have proper licenses for operation to begin with. After an extreme amount of fines, they closed all their locations, well, at least the ones that were in New York, that is. Then they set their eyes on the Commonwealth. They set up Zaza Puff Palace and Zaza Wonderland in Richmond, with affiliate stores in Williamsburg. Then in August, they decided to revitalize the name Zaza R Us in Henrico. And again, that caught attention, this time of the Richmond DEA. All the more reason to have a regulated and safe cannabis system functioning for Virginia. Well, that's going to do it for this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 through WB in Charlottesville. And reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
That'll do it for the A Block, but we've got plenty more this week, including our international report and an update on the fate of a jailed professional basketball player named Jared Shaw in Indonesia for receiving a shipment of edibles to treat his Crohn's disease. That country that has some of the most strict penalties, and Shaw could be facing the death penalty. We'll have the details when Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.